Ladies and gentlemen, it's Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Today is the 16th of June, and we are going to be taking a look at the latest Ukraine update. And most importantly, we are going to be looking at the United States' most recent aid package approved for Ukraine. And we're going to answer the question, is this really going to do anything at all? Let's get into it. So first off, let's take a look at the situation, changes to the front line that have happened in the past 24 hours. So as you can see, we remember yesterday, the Russians were advancing on the southern tip of their column, trying to continue to encircle or pincer Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. Just a heads up, I've checked the other spots and there has been very little movement in the Kharkiv front and even less movement near Mykolaiv. So the primary changes to the battlefield, predictably, are where most of the fighting forces are located, which is right here at the Severodonetsk region. So what have we seen in the past 24 hours? Well, you may notice that this Russian lower prong of the pincer has been stopped cold. There's been no movement. In fact, in really, other than the Russians' advance to the east here, you haven't really seen any progress at all. And this is probably good news because they want to drive deeper into this territory to further cut off the defenders in Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, and they seem like they aren't really able to do it. Instead, they're pushing to the west, which doesn't really, while obviously taking territory is good, it doesn't really convey them any major tactical value. They may simply want to seize this town here, Vorobika, but again, it doesn't just have the same value as seizing this town like Mykolaiv or these other towns and villages, and more importantly, roadways to the north, right? These are what are allowing the Ukrainian forces in this region, these key urban areas, Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, to be resupplied. And if the Russians don't control them, they're not going to be able to cut off those defenders. Other than that, we've also looked at Borodachine. If you remember 2 days ago, we saw the Russians making big advancements as sort of a preparation to seize Borodachine and Dolna. Well, as you can see from the map here, the Russians have not been successful in pushing across the bridge, seizing Borodachine. They set the conditions, but when they finally had to start pushing, they found it seemed to be encountering somewhat more resistance than expected. You notice that, of course, as we talked about, the Donetsk River here forms a natural front line where it makes sense that this is where the Ukrainian armed forces will want to mount their defense. It's very difficult to do river crossings. It forces you to cluster your forces together and then push them literally one by one across a river. It is makes you extremely vulnerable, and I think it's very likely that the Russians will struggle immensely to cross here. But along this forest line here, you may see a slightly more easy advance. This probably is more likely to be the advance that the Russians will see, sort of pin the Ukrainians in these along this river, but then have the primary attack be a flanking maneuver from Borodachine. Now, or towards Borodachine. But if the Ukrainians are well positioned, they're going to have forces here in Dolna, and so that if they attack Borodachine, the Dolna forces will have their back. If they attack Dolna, the Borodachine forces will turn and engage them. So there are defensive solutions to this problem. But this is the two major areas where we've seen significant changes in the battlefield. Now, I've got nicer maps. Hooray! Let's take a look here at the Borodachine, right? We're going to zoom way in on this right here. There we go, Borodachine. So you can see, looks like an 80th. I believe that's like the V is like an airborne brigade. So 80th and 81st, I believe to the left there is maybe like an air assault brigade. But they're conventional forces, and I believe the X represents a brigade level force. And just like we talked about, it looks like broadly these at the brigade level, right, they're holding Dolna and Borodicine respectively. And it actually looks like perhaps the 81st is pulled back even a bit from Dolna, though I suspect that those are probably general locations. And as a general rule, brigade headquarters, they're going to be placed back from the front lines. I would imagine that the majority of their combat power is going to be in Dolna and in Borodicine. Bohorodicine. And it looks from this map like there is obviously a front line, like we talked about, holding out along the wood line there, where the attack is most likely to come from. And then the Ukrainian forces are doing their absolute damnedest to stop the Russians from crossing the Donetsk River near Borodicine. So I think that's a good sign. Now let's move over to, of course, down here, where we've seen the lower pincer and a lot of the fighting taking place there. You could see from these arrows, it looks like the Russian forces have been pushing, just trying to push out in any direction they can. Now, obviously, the Ukrainian forces defending near Zolote, they are in significant danger, right? Because they're surrounded on three sides. They're in sort of a mini cauldron of their own. But as we've discussed, pushing in the most important direction, right, towards Mykolaiv, is difficult, is proving difficult, right? They're meeting resistance from, it looks like the 112th Brigade. I think L is landing maybe. And another, looks like another battalion of the 80th, I think, an airborne brigade, if I remember my military terms and graphics. These are actually NATO standard terms and graphics. So again, it looks like there is significant fighting basically wherever the Russians push. They've had some success trying to push the Ukrainians out of this pocket here, but it's just not of really significant strategic value as far as I can tell based on my, map analysis. That the real targets they want, you can see, are these roadways here, and they don't control any of them. The Ukrainians have effectively stopped the Russians from seizing the key roads, the key avenues of approach. Now, let's talk a little bit about the real news, or at least the real news in our English-speaking world, is a $1 billion aid package approved by the United States to Ukraine. Now, you and I think $1 billion is going to be a game changer. Unfortunately, while every little bit helps, the reality is we forget that the U.S. military pays a lot of money for its equipment. So $1 billion just doesn't go as far as it used to. Just like our grocery bills, the Pentagon also finds its money not going quite as far as it used to. So let's see. Obviously, $225 million is going to be humanitarian assistance. That is to help Ukrainians get access to safe drinking water, medical supplies, food, shelter, and healthcare. I'm here to tell you all of those things are instrumental to combat effectiveness. Your troops' ability to drink water, to receive proper medical care, get them back in the fight, rations and food, even think shelter like tents, cots, and healthcare, right? More probably establishing clinics and helping with supplies. All of those things are absolutely essential to effective combat operations. I think this is probably the highest return line item in this aid package. But when we look at the next $350 million, we see 18 155 howitzers and 36,000 rounds of ammunition. So that's a fair amount of ammunition, but in the grand scheme of things, it's actually not a ton. There are World War I operations that burned that in a day. 18 howitzers, right? Even if they're firing 100 rounds a day, you're talking about around 2,000 rounds a day as a burn rate. So this is maybe a month's worth of rounds. Then you have 18 tactical vehicles to tow said howitzers, and then ammunition for a high mobility artillery rocket system and for other tactical vehicles. To give you an idea, guys, 18 to 20 tactical vehicles, that is, in US terms, about maybe 2 companies worth of vehicles. So remember, there's 4 companies per battalion and 4 battalions per brigade. And we just saw a brigade level force is what is defending Borodicine, Dolna, right? So a brigade, so this is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a brigade. Obviously, every little bit helps, but you should understand just how not very far $350 million will take you. The final $650 million tranche is the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. This is giving them 2 coastal defense systems. This is thousands of secure radios. So those are encrypted radios, night vision, thermal devices, and of course, funding for training, maintenance, sustainment, transportation, and administrative costs. So that could be huge for the Ukrainians. While it doesn't give them additional tactical equipment, the actual additional warfighting equipment is limited. The making their warfighters more effective, especially at night, right? If the Ukrainians can become proficient at fighting at night while the Russian forces are generally blind, right? Russian forces seem to not even have optics. They definitely don't have night vision en masse. It could be really decisive. Imagine if the Ukrainians are able to be as active fighting at night as they are during the day. It would be a game changer, and you would see Russia just be burning itself out trying to defend round-the-clock offensives from Ukrainians. So these may actually be the highest return items that are in this entire budget, right? Certainly not the tiny amount of tactical vehicles and, you know, an unknown number of rounds for a rocket artillery. Of course, as always, the Ukrainians ask for more aid, and there's hope that other NATO allies will also step up and provide more lethal and non-lethal aid. But it's worth noting, again, guys, that what helps in war isn't always more guns. It's oftentimes more carts, horses, food, and everything that's behind that frontline soldier, allowing them to be combat effective. Anyway, do me a favor, if you like this video, hit subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't mean you'll see a whole bunch of videos, but it will help me get to that big 100K mark. Hopefully, let me know if there's other details I missed or things I got wrong. See you in the next one.